The moment the ambulance lights flashed through our kitchen window, I knew. My husband's face drained of color as paramedics rushed through our front door. But it wasn't concern in his eyes. It was terror. Not the kind when someone you love is in danger. The kind when your carefully laid plan falls apart. My name is Nora Fletcher, and until yesterday, I believed I was in a loving marriage with a man named Owen. We met 8 years ago at a neighborhood block party, where we both reached for the last cookie on a serving plate. He laughed and broke it in half to share. That small gesture of kindness and fairness seemed to capture everything about the man I thought he was. The early days of our relationship were sun-soaked and simple. Owen would surprise me with wildflower bouquets picked from the hiking trails near our town. He remembered every story I told him, asked about my childhood dreams, and made me feel like the most fascinating person in any room. When he proposed after 14 months of dating, I didn't hesitate to say yes. Our wedding was small, just 40 guests in my parents' backyard. Owen's sister Tess attended alone, having recently separated from her husband. I still remember how she hugged Owen too long at the reception, whispered something that made him frown momentarily before he caught me watching and quickly smiled. "What did Tess say?" I asked later that night. "Nothing important," Owen assured me. "Just sister stuff." The first 3 years of marriage were good. Not perfect, but good. We bought a small house with a guest cottage out back. I started teaching art at the local elementary school while Owen built his handyman business. We talked about having children someday, but agreed to wait until we felt more settled. The small problems started gradually. Owen began forgetting conversations we'd had. When I'd remind him, he'd insist we'd never discuss those things. "You must have dreamed it," he'd say with a laugh that somehow made me doubt myself. And I did start doubting my memory. Then came the subtle criticisms. My cooking lacked flavor. My outfits weren't quite right. My friends weren't interesting enough. Nothing direct, just suggestions that somehow left me feeling inadequate. 4 years into our marriage, Owen suggested his sister Tess move into our guest house after her divorce finalized. "It'll just be for a few months," he promised. "She needs family right now." I agreed because family matters to me. My parents had taught me that you show up for people in their darkest times. But from the moment Tess moved her things into our guest house, everything changed. Tess never approved of me. From the day we met, she made it clear I wasn't good enough for her brother. He always did have a soft spot for ordinary girls. She told me at a family dinner, her smile sharp as she looked me up and down. Owen had laughed it off, squeezing my hand under the table. But over time, his grip loosened, until one day, I realized I was sitting alone while he nodded along with his sister's jabs. Their whispered conversations would stop when I entered a room. The affection Owen once showed me slowly disappeared. When I asked questions, he'd dismiss my concerns with a wave. "You're imagining things. You're being too sensitive. Tess's family. She needs us right now." Tess's few months turned into a year, then 2. She inserted herself into every aspect of our lives. When Owen and I would plan a weekend away, she'd suddenly have a crisis that required his attention. When I cooked dinner, she'd mention an ingredient I'd forgotten, or suggest a better way to prepare something. When Owen and I disagreed, she was always there to take his side. "You're lucky Owen is so patient," she'd tell me, loud enough for him to hear. Not every husband would put up with so much. I began to wonder what she meant by so much. What terrible traits was I exhibiting? Owen never contradicted her assessments of me. In fact, he began to echo them. My friend Katie noticed the change in me. "You seem smaller somehow," she said over lunch one day, "like you're trying not to take up space." I brushed off her concern, but her words haunted me. I had become smaller, quieter, more cautious, constantly assessing my words and actions for potential criticism. I'd stopped painting, a hobby I'd loved since childhood, after Tess commented that my landscapes looked childish, and Owen had agreed that perhaps art was better left to real artists. Last spring, I found a text message on Owen's phone when he was in the shower. It was from Tess. "She's getting suspicious. Pay attention." When I asked him about it later, he accused me of snooping and turned the conversation into a 2-hour discussion of my trust issues. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs for some water and heard voices from the guest house. Owen and Tess were sitting close together at her kitchen table, speaking intensely. I couldn't make out the words, but the intimacy of their posture sent a chill through me. When Owen came back to our bed an hour later, he smelled like Tess's distinctive orange blossom perfume. "Where were you?" I asked. pretending to wake up. "Just checking on a noise outside," he said, turning his back to me. The next morning, I found my prescription sleeping pills missing from the bathroom cabinet. When I mentioned it to Owen, he seemed oddly interested. "Are you sure you didn't use them all?" "Positive. I had at least half a bottle left." "Maybe you took them and forgot. You've been pretty forgetful lately." Had I been forgetful? I couldn't be certain anymore. Years of having my reality questioned had worn down my confidence. That summer, Owen became unusually attentive. He suggested I visit my parents for a week. "You deserve a break." And when I returned, something felt different in our house. Items had been moved slightly. My personal journals seemed rearranged on their shelf. Owen was jumpy, checking his phone more often. And the whispers with Tess intensified. I started keeping notes on my phone about conversations and events, trying to anchor myself to reality when Owen would tell me I was misremembering. But yesterday, everything became crystal clear. Owen had been acting strange all morning, checking his watch, asking if I'd slept well. "You look tired," he kept saying, though I felt fine. Then suddenly, he announced he was making coffee. In our 8 years together, Owen had never, not once, offered to make me coffee. He didn't even know how I took it. "I'm trying a special blend," he said, his voice oddly cheerful. "It's from that shop you like." I watched from the doorway as he prepared 3 mugs. His movements were deliberate, focused. When he thought I wasn't looking, he pulled something from his pocket and sprinkled it into one of the cups, stirring carefully. My heart pounded as he called his sister in from the guest house. "Coffee's ready." He placed the mugs on the kitchen counter. "This one's yours," he said, sliding the doctored cup toward me with an insistence that made my skin crawl. "Made you a special coffee, honey." The eagerness in his voice was new and unsettling. I lifted the mug, pretending to take a sip. There was a strange smell beneath the coffee aroma, bitter, almost medicinal. "Drink up," Owen urged, watching me intently. "It'll make you feel better." Tess entered, her usual sneer fixed in place. "Morning, Nora. Still in your pajamas at 10? How? Sweet." Owen pushed a mug toward his sister. "Yours is the one with extra cream, Tess." I set my mug down untouched. "I need to use the bathroom," I said, leaving the kitchen. In the hallway, I pressed my back against the wall, trying to calm my breathing. Something was very wrong. When I returned, Tess was complaining about neighborhood noise while Owen nodded along, but his eyes kept darting to my full mug. "Sorry," I said, reaching for my coffee. "Got distracted." As Tess turned to look out the window at something, I quickly switched our mugs. Either I was paranoid, or my husband had just tried to poison me. Either way, I needed to know. "The neighbors are letting their kids scream again," Tess said, turning back and grabbing what she thought was her mug. She took a large gulp and made a face. "This tastes strange. Did you change coffee brands?" Owen's eyes widened just slightly. "No, same as always." I pretended to sip from mine, watching them both over the rim. Within 20 minutes, Tess complained of feeling dizzy. 10 minutes later, she stumbled, knocking a plant to the floor. "I don't feel right," she mumbled, her words slurring. Then she collapsed. Owen rushed to her side. Panic, genuine now. "Tess? Tess!" He looked up at me, and in that moment, I saw it. The realization that his sister had consumed whatever had been meant for me. "Call an ambulance," I said calmly, my voice steadier than I felt. As he fumbled for his phone, I picked up both coffee mugs and set them on a high shelf, out of reach but preserved. Then I called 911 myself. The dispatcher asked if the person was breathing. I checked Tess's pulse, rapid but present. "Yes, she's breathing but unconscious. I think she may have been poisoned." Owen's head snapped up at that word. "What are you talking about? She probably just fainted." But his protest lacked conviction, and his eyes kept returning to the mugs I'd placed beyond his reach. The ambulance arrived 7 minutes later. As paramedics worked on Tess in our kitchen, I stood back, watching my husband. He couldn't take his eyes off the mugs. When one of the paramedics asked what she might have ingested, I spoke up. "She drank coffee my husband prepared specially this morning. It had an unusual smell." I turned to Owen. "Maybe you should tell them what was in it." The look he gave me, hatred mixed with fear, confirmed everything. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice shook. The paramedic glanced between us. "We need to know what we're dealing with. Every minute counts." When Owen remained silent, I retrieved the mugs and handed them to the paramedic. "She drank from this one. It was originally meant for me." As they rushed Tess to the hospital, A police officer stayed behind to ask questions. Owen maintained his innocence, claiming I was confused, unstable even. He reminded the officer of my missing sleeping pills, suggesting I might be having some kind of breakdown. "She's been forgetting things, acting paranoid," Owen told the officer. "I've been worried about her mental health for months." The officer turned to me. "Ma'am?" "Test the mugs," I said simply, "and check our bathroom cabinet for my missing prescription." The officer took the mugs for testing, and Owen's nervous glances told me all I needed to know. That night, alone in our home, Owen had gone to the hospital with his sister. I sat in the dark and faced the truth. My husband had tried to kill me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I felt strangely calm, as if a fog had finally lifted. For years, I'd been questioning my perception, my memory, my worth. Now I had concrete proof that the problem had never been me. I walked through our house with new eyes, noticing small things that had bothered me subconsciously. How Owen kept all our financial information locked in his workshop. How photos of my family had gradually disappeared from our walls, replaced by pictures of Owen with his friends, Owen with Tess. How my painting supplies had been moved to the garage, then the shed, then given away because you never use them anymore. In our bedroom, I found a hidden key taped under his nightstand drawer. It opened his filing cabinet, where I discovered life insurance policies. One for him, one for me. Mine had been increased to $750,000 6 months ago. Owen was the sole beneficiary. I took photos of everything with my phone, then carefully replaced it all exactly as I'd found it. The next morning brought a knock at the door. 2 police officers stood on our porch. "Mrs. Fletcher, we need to ask you some more questions about yesterday's incident." They told me Tess would recover. They also told me the coffee had contained a near-lethal dose of my own prescription sleeping pills, crushed and dissolved. Pills that had gone missing from my bathroom cabinet weeks ago, which I'd assumed I'd misplaced. "We've obtained a warrant to search the property," one officer explained. "Based on the toxicology report from the coffee residue, this appears to be attempted murder." As they combed through our house, I sat on the front porch, feeling strangely homeless, despite being at my own address. Our neighbor, Mrs. Bennett, brought me tea and sat silently beside me for a while. "I've been worried about you," she finally said. "I've seen things." "What things?" I asked. She hesitated. "Your husband and your neighbor, Julia. They've been meeting at her house when you're at work. For at least a year now." Julia, the woman 3 houses down who always complimented Owen's handyman skills, who had recently begun inviting us to dinner parties we somehow never attended because Tess always had some crisis the day of. "There's more," Mrs. Bennett continued reluctantly. "I've overheard your husband and his sister talking in your backyard. About you. About getting rid of you." I thanked her for her honesty, for being perhaps the only person who had seen what was happening and was willing to tell me the truth. When Owen finally returned home that afternoon, police cars pulled up behind him. The look on his face when officers approached him in our driveway still haunts me. Not remorse, but rage at being caught. As they led him away in handcuffs, he shouted back at me, "You'll never prove anything. It was Tess's idea." And there it was, the confession and the betrayal, all at once. In the weeks that followed, the truth unraveled like a cheap sweater. Owen had been having an affair with Julia for nearly 2 years. They wanted to start fresh, but Owen didn't want to lose his half of our house or pay alimony. Tess had known about the affair and encouraged it, happy to help push me out of her brother's life one way or another. But she'd never signed up for murder. That had been Owen's escalation, his solution to a problem he no longer wanted to manage diplomatically. The prosecutor, a direct woman named Maria, laid it out for me. "We have strong evidence, the toxicology reports, the life insurance policy, witness statements, and now Tess's testimony. She's taken a plea deal." Tess had recovered physically, though according to her doctors, she might have suffered some lasting kidney damage. She'd turned on Owen completely, providing investigators with text messages, recorded conversations, and a full confession of their plot to systematically destroy my self-confidence and isolate me from friends and family. "It started small," she told investigators. "Owen was unhappy in the marriage but didn't want to lose the house or pay alimony. He asked me to help make Nora seem unstable, so if they divorced, he'd have leverage for a better settlement. What had begun as financial manipulation had evolved into something much darker when Owen started his affair with Julia. Suddenly, divorce wasn't enough. He wanted freedom without consequences. Owen's parents, who had always been distant with me, surprised everyone by reaching out. They came to my rental apartment, Owen's father so diminished by shame he could barely meet my eyes. We knew Tess was difficult, his mother said carefully, but we never imagined Owen could. She couldn't finish the sentence. We've cut off his legal fund, his father said firmly. Whatever happens to him now, he's earned it. As I sat in the courtroom during Owen's trial 6 months later, I watched him transform from the man I'd married into someone I'd never known. When presented with evidence, the toxicology reports, the pharmacy records showing he'd refilled my prescription without telling me, the text messages between him and Tess discussing how to make me disappear, he aged before my eyes. Tess took a plea deal to testify against her brother. She couldn't look at me during her testimony, especially when she admitted to years of deliberate cruelty designed to isolate me and make me doubt myself. Owen said if we could get her unstable enough, no one would believe her if she ever suspected anything, she told the court, her voice barely audible. The prosecutor asked, "Did you know he was planning to poison her?" Tess shook her head. "Not until that morning," he texted me. "It ends today." I thought he meant he was going to ask for a divorce. Near the end of the trial, Owen took the stand in his own defense. He tried to blame everything on Tess, claiming she had become obsessed with destroying me out of jealousy. Then he tried to blame Julia, saying she had pressured him into finding a way for them to be together. Finally, he tried to blame me. She was distant, controlling, he claimed, looking at the jury imploringly. I felt trapped. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours. When the verdict came, guilty on attempted murder and conspiracy charges, I felt no satisfaction, only emptiness. The life I'd built had been a mirage. Owen received 18 years. Tess got 3 years probation and community service. Julia, who claimed she had no knowledge of the murder plot but admitted to the affair, lost her nursing job when the scandal broke and eventually moved away. I got freedom from a marriage that had nearly killed me. The first few months after the trial were the hardest. I jumped at shadows, checked my food obsessively, and woke from nightmares where Owen stood over me, coffee mug in hand. My therapist called it post-traumatic response and assured me it would fade with time and work. My parents wanted me to move back to my hometown, start fresh near family. "We can protect you," my father said, his voice breaking. It killed me to see how much this had hurt them too. The knowledge that the man they had welcomed as a son had tried to murder their daughter. But I didn't want to run away. This town had been my home for 8 years. I had students who counted on me, colleagues who had supported me through the trial, neighbors like Mrs. Bennett who had told the truth when it mattered. I did move houses, though. Sold the place I'd shared with Owen and found a small cottage near the elementary school where I taught. The first night there, I sat on my new porch swing and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Katie helped me paint every room in colors Owen would have hated, vibrant blues and sunny yellows. My parents drove up for a weekend and helped me plant a garden. "Only beautiful things grow here," my mother declared, as we pressed flower seeds into the soil. I started painting again, hesitantly at first. My initial attempts were dark, shadowy figures and fractured landscapes that my therapist said represented my broken trust. But gradually, light crept into my canvases. 6 months after the trial, I received a letter from Tess. I almost burned it unopened, but curiosity won out. "I know you can never forgive me," she wrote, "and I'm not asking for that, but I want you to know that despite everything I said and did, I always saw your goodness. That's why I resented you so much. You were genuinely kind in a way I've never managed to be. I told myself you were faking it because the alternative was accepting that I'm just not a good person." She ended with, "I hope someday you find someone who deserves your kindness." Owen never did. Neither did I. I didn't respond, but I didn't throw the letter away either. It sits in my desk drawer, not because I've forgiven her, but because it reminds me that my perception was always accurate. I wasn't crazy or forgetful or too sensitive. I was right all along. A year has passed since that morning in our kitchen. I've sold our house, moved to a new place, and started rebuilding. Sometimes I still wake up shaking, the phantom smell of that tainted coffee in my nostrils. But those nights come less frequently now. Yesterday, I opened my own small bookshop, something I'd always dreamed of doing but Owen had discouraged. "Bookstores are dying," he'd say. "It's not practical." Now I realize he never wanted me to have anything that was truly mine. The shop adjoins a gallery where I sell my paintings and host art classes for children on weekends. The money from the house sale made it possible, along with the settlement from dissolving our marriage assets. Owen's handyman business had been more successful than he'd led me to believe. Another deception in a marriage built on them. I've learned to trust again, slowly. Not just others, but myself, my instincts, my perceptions, my worth. The coffee mugs that saved my life sit on a shelf in my office, a reminder that paying attention can be the difference between life and death. Sometimes customers ask about them. They're just mugs, I say with a smile, but they're so much more than that. They're proof that even when everyone you love betrays you, you can still save yourself. Last week, a new customer came into the shop. He asked thoughtful questions about books, bought a small landscape painting, and left without asking for my number or making me feel uncomfortable in any way. He returned the next day with a recommendation for a novel he'd thought I might enjoy based on our conversation. I'm not ready for romance. May never be again, but I am ready for genuine connections based on mutual respect. When he asked if I'd like to get tea sometime, I surprised myself by saying yes. Not coffee? He asked. Never coffee, I replied. He didn't press for an explanation, just nodded and said, tea it is. As I locked up the shop last night, I caught my reflection in the window, standing straight, eyes clear. A woman who trusted herself enough to switch mugs, preserve evidence, and rebuild her life from ashes. Owen's letter arrived this morning, his first communication since sentencing. I recognized his handwriting on the envelope and felt nothing but a distant pity. I opened it outside, letting the spring breeze ensure not even his words would be trapped in my home. I still love you, he wrote. I made a terrible mistake. Once, those words might have swayed me, made me doubt my worth or my decisions. Today, I fed the letter into my garden shredder and used it as mulch for my flowering plants. Even his lies can nourish something beautiful now. The coffee mugs sit on their shelf, ordinary objects that changed everything. One saved my life, the other exposed the truth. Together, they remind me daily. Sometimes survival looks like nothing more dramatic than a simple swap, a moment of clarity, a decision to trust yourself when the world tells you not to. And that's enough. That's everything.